I just got the Odin 3 in, and I have to be honest with you guys, this video is not going to be what I exactly planned originally. The second I turned this thing on, that entire plan just went out the window because this device is so confusing, and it's also exhilarating. This device here is so much faster than I thought. I've seen a lot of other reviews already popping up for the Odin 3, and I gotta admit, a lot of people are kind of taking the wait and see approach. They're talking about drivers, maturity, and the potential, and I'm telling you right now, if you want this for PC gaming and Android gaming, I don't think you gotta wait. This thing outside of the box is an absolute monster. So grab something to drink and let's hop in and take a closer look at the Odin 3. And let me tell you why I'm so impressed with this thing. First, a disclaimer, this was sent to me from AYN for review. As with all my videos, the company is not seeing the video beforehand. They have no input in what I'm saying, and of course, I'm going to give you my honest thoughts to what I think about it. Now, I've already opened mine up, but one thing that's really nice to see on these new units is they're actually checking them for quality control before shipping them out. As someone that had 12 dead TVs in a row, this is something that, for me anyways, is a big plus. I like knowing someone checked it before shipping it out to make sure it works. Aside from the device, the only other things we get in the box are of course the little overview of the handheld, and of course the standard AYN USB cable. The one they sent over to me was the atomic purple, and I'll be honest, this wasn't my first choice. I really like the black. Now that I have it in my hand though, it doesn't actually look as bad as I thought. I'm still not a fan of this two-tone design. I would have preferred they kept this transparent plastic onto the front as well. Of course, since the glass has to adhere to something, they can't use this plastic to adhere to it. First, I guess let's just start with the physical experience, because you really have to hold this thing to understand it. The first word that came to my mind when I picked it up was dense. All in all, the build quality is definitely above what I expected. A lot of handhelds, even ones pushing $400 and up, can feel a little bit hollow. This feels like a solid ingot of technology. It has a heft to it that screams premium, and it feels expensive, even though it's much cheaper than something like the ROG Ally X. As someone that's really picky with little details, seeing the QR code underneath the transparent model is not ideal. Obviously it's not a game breaker, and you're not looking at the back of the device when you're playing, but I think they could have done away without this. I might open this a little while later and take that off. I was definitely worried about the ergonomics. The internet has been buzzing with comments saying, oh, it's a step back from the Odin 2, it's too small, it's cramped. This is one thing I definitely disagree on. For me, these grips are absolutely fantastic. They have a real subtle curvature to them that almost just locks into the palm. There's also quite a lot of grip to hold on to, a lot more than I thought. I think it was Russ that said it, but he was using his pinkies kind of holding up the device. I've actually been changing the way I hold this on this device in particular. With larger handhelds like the ROG Ally X, you would kind of grip the entire back. Since this is a lot shorter than those devices, you do actually end up either putting your pinkies underneath, or what I do, I just pull my extra fingers over and hold them into my hand. This essentially means that I'm only really holding it with my pointer finger and my middle finger. However, the sheer weight of the device is being held up by my ring finger. It's not actually that bad to hold if you hold it like this. While I'm at it, I might as well talk about the joysticks. For me anyways, a lot of ARM handhelds are limited because of the height of the joysticks. It makes games like shooters impossible to play. This, however, changes the experience entirely. For me, I'm used to a lot of large handhelds like the ROG Ally X and the MSI Claw. These nearly feel like full-size joysticks that you'd see on those types of handhelds. They're high enough up that your thumb isn't going to have to reach down to use them. And there's a nice anti-friction ring around the edge. In fact, look at this. They're basically the same height as the ROG Ally X. I don't know about you, but that's pretty nice to see. Having that extra height makes this a much more usable experience. In fact, we might as well get some accurate measurements. The joystick caps are 16.2 millimeters, and if I measure the height, they're about 9mm. That's remarkable. This is what the ROG Ally X looks like. And the numbers speak for themselves, don't they? Essentially what they've done is they've taken full-size joysticks from an x86 device and shrunk them down to fit inside an ARM device. Quite remarkable. Another thing I guess a lot of people are worried about is these face buttons. These are so quiet, I love it. They also don't seem to be rubbing on the opening. These are some of the quietest rubber membrane buttons I've ever seen. One thing that remains unchanged, I guess, is the D-pad. This is just exactly as you remember it on any other AYN device. All these controls are remarkably quiet, except the R1 and L1. These are micro switches, and damn, they're clicky. Some people really like this, but I like quiet, and these are not quiet. In fact, I'd go as far as to say these are some of the clickiest bumpers I've ever seen. The good thing about them is you can press them from any angle, and they do register. They also haven't stuck. The triggers also have a really nice rounded edge to them. These are large paddle triggers. This is exactly what I personally like on a handheld. With a subtle amount of flair, they stick out just ever so slightly from the shell. If you put this down on a table, it is going to rest on that trigger. The only other thing we get on the top is a power button, which also has a fingerprint sensor and a nice quiet volume button. It's actually very hard to fault the Odin 3. The design is pretty reminiscent of some of the best we've seen in the arena. One thing I'd really like to see on ARM handhelds moving forward is maybe a USB port on the top too. That might be really nice. I don't know though, the design itself is pretty hard to fault. I really like it. There's some back paddles as well, but I don't think I'm going to ever use these. Definitely a nice feature if someone wants to program them. I guess it also would have been nice maybe if the bottom of the fan was black. It might have blended in a little bit better. What happens when you turn on the device? You're greeted by this beautiful AMOLED panel. I definitely want to dive more into this panel in my full review. But for now, let me just tell you, I do think it's really nice. Is it the best panel I've seen on a handheld? Probably not, but it's damn close. This is full brightness, and you can see it under my bright studio lights really well. Not bad. As far as the panel goes, you can go up to 4K HDR in YouTube, but this has no DRM whatsoever, so you can't watch things like Crunchyroll, Netflix, or Prime Video, which is a shame because one of the best things about these devices is doubling as a small tablet with a built-in controller. The Portal had DRM, so did the Odin 2, but this one unfortunately doesn't seem to have any. I'm not sure if they could add this in a future update, but it'd be really nice to see. It is kind of cool too how we've gotten away from the bezels on the screen. Now I do want to address one of the other controversies about this device, the fan. I've seen people freaking out in comments on Reddit and on Discord, saying that it's really loud and it can get really annoying really fast. But the reality is that we have 3 different performance toggles and we have 3 different fan modes. If you turn on sport mode, it sounds like a jet engine preparing to take off. However, 99% of people should just use this in smart mode. It's absolutely silent, and even when it's hot, it's not that loud. My unit as well doesn't have that annoying whine to it that some of the other reviewers have had. When I was downloading massive PC games on GameHub Lite with smart mode on, I could hear the fan, but it didn't sound bad. It was audible, but it was just a regular fan noise. Something that wouldn't bother me, but if you don't like fan noise, it might bother you. Speaking of Wi-Fi speeds, this thing is fast. Damn fast. Not the fastest I've seen, as some x86 handhelds can reach 1.7, but 1.3 ain't bad for ARM. Another thing that surprised me is the battery. And the battery, I expected it to melt. It's the Snapdragon 8 Elite. It's a powerhouse for ARM. But while I was downloading those massive PC games, screen on, Wi-Fi blasting full speed, you can watch the percentage and it takes forever to drop. This is a very efficient SoC. It's a 3nm chip, and it does a good job at adjusting its frequencies when it's not using it. I haven't done a full drain test yet. That's going to be in the full review, but my guess is this is going to be slightly better than the Odin 2. so I would put it just over 24 hours for Pokemon Red. However, as mentioned, yes, I haven't tested it yet. That's just a gut feeling. It's definitely an all-day device. It sips power when it should, and that's a huge relief. What about the games? What have I been playing? Well, you know what's funny? I usually start these videos with emulation. How does GameCube run? How does PS2 run? I haven't played any retro emulation on this thing yet. Why? Because PC gaming and native Android gaming is just so good. And I kind of got distracted. As far as Android gaming goes, I'm pretty positive everything that you have is going to be running maxed out. Subnautica is the biggest AAA game that I have on Android, and it runs perfectly fine with every setting maxed out. And I'm not talking 60 FPS. This feels incredibly smooth. So check this out. That's that CPU going over 4 gigahertz. I think it's just remarkable that Android devices can run over 4 gigahertz now. This is an older app, so unfortunately it can't show the GPU frequencies. But it's pretty cool, I think, to see how smooth this all runs. I never thought I'd see a day when ARM devices could go this fast. 4.4 gigahertz nearly on those 2 prime cores. That's remarkable. So it can get up to about 75 degrees Celsius in Android games, but everything runs maxed out. Another interesting thing to note too, I was able to install every single Android game that I have. This includes stuff like Streets of Rage and Loop Hero. Other games that are like 50-50 on other devices include Titan Quest. This doesn't run on every single device. You can't even load it on every single device, but you can load it here. Wreckfest is another one like that. You can only load this on certain devices, but this one does work really well on this device. It's very rare that I can load the 3 AAA games for Android that I usually test: Wreckfest, Subnautica, and Titan Quest. But if you stuck with me this long, I have to show you something really special. GameHub. If you haven't watched my video on how to optimize GameHub and you're curious, I'll leave that link down below. Here's a fun experiment. What is it like when you run a game on ARM versus x86? Which one's more efficient? For consistency, I'm just going to cap both of these at 60 FPS and let's see which one runs better. It's also interesting to see the screen differences. The one on the Odin 3 looks much more vibrant, and it also looks sharper because there's much more pixels per square inch than there is on the Ally X. You start to notice something pretty interesting when you compare this to an x86 device. Not only is the GPU usage remarkably low at only 35%, but it's only at about 47 degrees Celsius. To maintain that solid 60 FPS, you'll only need about 5 watts. This is remarkably low and completely unheard of on x86. Because wait till you see the ROG Ally X. Remember, 5 to 6 watts. For the Ally X, to get 60 FPS on this game, you're looking at 17.5 watts. It's still going to get you about 4 hours of battery life, which is really good for an x86 handheld, but about 15 watts. 5 watts versus 15 watts. That means that the Odin is 3 times more efficient to do the same game at the same settings with the same resolution. Seeing things like this run on an x86 handheld is already pretty cool, because being a primary desktop gamer for most of my life, being able to take these on the go is pretty neat. However, being able to take these on the go on something so small is even cooler. 4 to 5 watts, that's just absolutely crazy. But how does it handle even more demanding games? Let's try Stray and see how well it works too. This ran on my Y700 tablet, and I have a video up for that too. I'm going to use exclusive full screen settings at 1080p. It's the native resolution of the panel. Max frame rate, I'm just going to leave that to 60. I'm going to turn off VSync because we're capping the FPS. Let's shut off motion blur, and I'm going to turn all these down. Let's just start with medium, and let's go from there. And you can definitely hear the fan going too. One thing to note, this does get really hot when you're playing some of these AAA PC games. I'm actually getting some thermal throttling warnings, and it's going up to about 90 degrees Celsius. So the cooling solution is probably not up to par for what kind of wattage they're putting through here. If I was AYN, I would probably cap the TDP to about 12 or 13 watts. 15 to 20 watts nearly is obviously just too much power for the cooling system. So if I cap it to 30 FPS, the wattage isn't going over 10. This is keeping the temperature stable at around 71 to 75 degrees Celsius. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that games like this are not playable. You can still lower it down to 720p. And I would also drop down the translation params to about extreme or performance, and then just move these up one at a time if it fails to boot. How does it work at 720p? With some lighter settings. Let's try it out. So already I can tell this is working much better. Unfortunately, it is giving me some graphical glitches. Honestly, this is kind of disappointing to see, because the Y700 Gen 4 ran this fine and there was no graphical glitches. You can't even use native rendering because you can only use this when you have enough overhead, and we don't with this kind of game, which means you are going to have some extra latency. Megabonk's pretty interesting because on an x86 handheld, you can get over 4 hours of battery life. But let's start the game up on both and see what the performance and the metrics look like. Remember, these are the same settings on both, with both capped to 60 FPS, 15 watts average on the Ally X. And not only did I not die, but I managed to level up and use less power doing so, about 10 watts. So there is a point of diminishing return where the efficiency does kind of lean into x86's favor, and that's going to be with the heavier games. Both are a good experience though, and both are perfectly playable. I wonder if I can get any AAA games running on the Odin 3. Let's start off with Deep Rock Galactic. I'm not going to change anything, including the resolution, so it's going to stay at 720p, but I'm going to drop down the translation params to extreme. Let's see if this starts just by default. It seems to want to use one of the x64 versions of Proton. I'm not really sure if this is going to work. Didn't get any of those working on the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2. Remarkably, after about an hour and a half, I still have 84% battery. Man, that is just crazy to see 15 watts on a little handheld like this. Ooh, wow, it works. Ooh, never mind. I don't know what the settings are, but this is a little too much for this device. I also wonder if it's because it's using DirectX 12. Honestly, I'm kind of shocked to see it start with DirectX 12 to begin with. It was running ultra settings. Let's set those down. That was actually really impressive. Wow. It was running ultra settings at 40 FPS. I mean, it's working. 720p medium settings, and I'm getting about 45 FPS. There's two problems I see right now, and that's this stutter that happens every so often. See? It says it's working smooth, and you don't see it on the frame time graph, but it does kind of stutter. You know, I think it might be because of thermal throttling. It's running at 96 degrees Celsius. Wow. If I drop it down to performance mode, it's actually smoother than high performance. I think it's just because it's using less wattage. This thing is not stable with 15 watts, but it's much smoother now, isn't it? 60 FPS with 720p medium settings. It's pretty remarkable. I don't think I would use this device in particular to play this graphically intensive game. Coffee Talk, Ball Pit, these are the kind of games that you want to play on this device. Upper tier, maybe Hollow Knight Silksong. Hades is another one that would work. Stray would probably work better if we had some more modern drivers. The latest drivers have some graphical glitches. I think this device has a lot of potential, but right now there's just probably too many variables to make a definitive answer. I see why Russ and a lot of other reviewers are kind of on the wait and see bench, because I think I am too. It's interesting. I'm not sure I'd recommend this to every person. There's definitely a type of person out there though that would want something like this, because I like tinkering with stuff and I like having a lot of overhead, and I think this is definitely the kind of device that I enjoy. But if someone likes a more stable experience, I think the Odin 2 Portal might be a better buy. Don't get me wrong though, I think this is an incredible device. I don't think this is a bad device, not by any means. I think AYN just needs to adjust a few things on it. Once they tune their power profile so the cooling can manage it just a little bit better. Once they adjust the fan curve, the sport fan mode is just too loud. The others are absolutely fine, like I'm in automatic right now and the noise isn't bothering me whatsoever. Again, this is just my first look, so take this review with a grain of salt. This isn't a review. I just wanted to set this up and try a few games to see what it was like. I am impressed, but it's got a little ways to go still. What do you guys think of the Odin 3? Do you like the performance overhead, or are you going to wait on this one? Let me know in the comments below. I'm going to keep tinkering with this and see how much of my Steam library I can get working on here. I'm already going to have a blast with all these indie games, but I want to know what kind of AAA games I can play that don't push the TDP too much. Let me know what you think in the comments below. As always, thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.